The courtroom was dead silent as Judge Harrington adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Kendra Lawson," he announced, "the jury finds you guilty." Gasps filled the room. Kendra, a black woman standing tall in a navy blue suit, didn't flinch. The prosecutor smirked. The public defender shook his head in defeat and the judge's gavel slammed down, sealing her fate. But then Kendra calmly stepped forward. "Before sentencing, Your Honor, there's something you should know." She paused, her voice steady. "I am a U.S. attorney." Silence. Shock. "How did it come to this? Before we dive into the story, let me know where you're watching from. And if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this." 2 days earlier, Kendra Lawson was driving down a 2-lane highway that cut through the heart of Griffin County, a small southern town she'd barely heard of before. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend, just a quick visit to her mother, who'd recently moved to the area after retiring. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the cotton fields, and the radio hummed softly in the background. Kendra glanced at her GPS, 20 more miles to go. Nothing out of the ordinary, but ordinary didn't last long in a place like Griffin County. Needing gas, Kendra pulled into a small convenience store off the highway. The sign above the door flickered weakly. "Ralph's Mart, since 1954. The parking." Lot was half empty, save for an old pickup truck and a couple of rusted sedans. Kendra stepped out of her car, her heels clicking lightly against the pavement. As she walked toward the store, she noticed the stairs. 2 older white men sat on a bench outside, sipping from styrofoam cups. One elbowed the other, nodding toward her. "Kendra." The other just muttered, "Ain't seen one like her around here in a while." She'd heard worse. Ignoring them, she headed inside. The convenience store smelled of stale tobacco and bleach. Behind the counter stood Earl, a middle-aged, white man with thinning hair and an expression like he'd bitten into a lemon. His eyes narrowed the moment Kendra walked in. "Help you with something?" he asked, voice flat, gaze cold. "I just need to prepay for pump 4, Kendra replied, pulling out a $20 bill before she could place the money on the counter. A white man in a flannel shirt pushed past her, dropping a 6-pack of beer onto the counter. "Hold up, Earl. Ring me up first." Kendra blinked, momentarily stunned. "Excuse me, I was here first." Earl didn't even glance her way. "He's a regular," he muttered, scanning the beer. Anger flared in Kendra's chest, but she kept her voice even. "Regular or not, I'm standing here ready to pay. I'd appreciate it if you'd finish helping me before moving on to the next customer." The man in flannel turned, eyes narrowing. "Look, lady, if you don't like how we do things round here, you can take your business somewhere else." Kendra inhaled slowly, reining in the sharp retort that sat on the tip of her tongue. "I'm just asking for fair treatment. Nothing more." That was all it took. Earl slapped his hand down on the counter. "I don't need no lecture from you. You're causing a scene. Either pay and get out, or I'll call the cops." Kendra's heart pounded. This wasn't her first time dealing with racial hostility, but there was something about the smugness in their faces, the casual way they dismissed her presence, that made her blood boil. She reached into her wallet, pulled out another 20, and placed it firmly on the counter. "Pump 4, she said, her tone clipped. Earl snatched the bill, but instead of ringing it up, he picked up the phone behind the counter. "Actually, forget it. You're loitering. I'm calling the sheriff." Kendra's eyes widened. "Loitering? I'm trying to buy gas." "Yeah?" Earl sneered. "Tell it to the cops." Before she could say another word, the jingling of the bell above the door signaled the arrival of Officer Reed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore his badge like a trophy. His eyes landed on Kendra, then flicked to Earl, who pointed accusingly. "She's been harassing customers and refusing to leave," Earl said, voice thick with feigned frustration. Kendra stepped forward, holding up her hands. "That's not true. I was just trying to prepay for gas and he—" "ID," Officer Reed interrupted, his hand already resting on his holster. Kendra froze. "Why do you need my ID? I haven't done anything wrong." Reed's expression hardened. "Ma'am, you're causing a disturbance. Show me your ID or I'll have to detain you." Her legal mind raced. She knew her rights. There was no probable cause, no crime committed. But standing her ground would only escalate the situation, and she could already see the older men outside. watching with smug satisfaction. Wordlessly, she reached into her purse and handed over her driver's license. Reed barely glanced at it before nodding. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "What?" Kendra's voice rose in disbelief. "For what?" "Disturbing the peace," Reed replied, already pulling out his handcuffs. Resisting if you don't comply right now, every instinct screamed at her to protest, to cite the law he was so blatantly ignoring. But one look at his face told her he wasn't interested in the law. This was about power. "I'm an attorney," she said, keeping her voice calm. "You're making a mistake." Reed's lips curled into a mocking smile. "That so? Well, Miss Attorney, you can explain it down at the station." The cold metal of the cuffs snapped around her wrists. As he marched her out of the store, Kendra caught the satisfied smirk on Earl's face. One of the men on the bench chuckled. "Shoulda. Known her mouth would get her in trouble," he muttered. The sun was still shining, the highway still buzzing with the hum of passing cars. To anyone driving by, it might have looked like just another arrest in a sleepy southern town. But for Kendra, it was the beginning of a nightmare she never saw coming. Kendra's wrists throbbed from the tight handcuffs as Officer Reed shoved her into the back seat of the patrol car. The town's sunlit streets blurred past the window, but all she could focus on was the weight of the injustice settling in her chest. She'd handled countless cases of wrongful arrest in her career, but being on the other side of the system was different. It was personal, humiliating, infuriating. At the station, the atmosphere reeked of stale coffee and unchecked authority. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man with graying hair, glanced up lazily as Reed marched her inside. "What you got?" the sergeant asked, barely looking at Kendra. "Disturbing the peace," Reed replied, smirking. "Refused to leave Ralph's Mart after harassing customers." "Mouthy too," Kendra's jaw tightened. "That's not what happened, and you know it." The sergeant finally gave her a once-over, his gaze lingering on her tailored blazer and professional demeanor. "Looks more like a lawyer than a troublemaker," he muttered. Reed chuckled. "That's what she claims." The word claims stung more than the cuffs digging into her skin. "I don't claim," Kendra snapped. "I am an attorney. I demand my phone call." Reed leaned in, his breath sour with coffee. "Demand all you want. This ain't the city. You play by our rules here." With that, he shoved her toward the holding cells. The metal door clanged shut behind her, sealing her in a grimy space barely large enough for the narrow bench bolted to the wall. The flickering overhead light buzzed like an insect trapped in amber. "Hey!" a voice muttered from the corner. Kendra turned to see a woman, Latina, mid-30s, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest. Her face was drawn, eyes hollow. "What did they get you for?" "Buying gas while black," Kendra replied dryly, lowering herself onto the bench. "And you?" The woman laughed bitterly. "Sleeping in my own apartment. Landlord said I was trespassing. Eviction notice came this morning. I paid rent last week." Kendra's stomach twisted. It wasn't just her. This town didn't just tolerate injustice. It thrived on it. Hours dragged by. Every time Kendra asked for her phone call, she was met with a dismissive wave. It wasn't until Officer Reed returned, coffee in hand and smug grin firmly in place, that she realized how deep the corruption ran. "Looks like you're stuck here overnight," he drawled, leaning against the cell bars. "Unless you want to apologize to good old Earl, maybe he'll drop the charges." Kendra's eyes narrowed. "Apologize for what? Existing?" Reed shrugged. "Suit yourself. Ain't like anyone's rushing to bail you out." Her heart sank. Without her phone call, no one even knew she was here. Her mother would assume she'd gotten delayed. Her office? They might not notice her absence until Monday. "And don't think flashing that fancy law degree will save you," Reed continued, voice dropping into a menacing whisper. "Round here, we don't take kindly to outsiders acting like they're better than us." That's when she saw it. The file tucked under his arm, marked with her name. Reed noticed her gaze and smirked. He slapped the file against the bars. "Funny thing," he said. "Witness statements claim you were aggressive. One even says you tried to push Earl." Kendra's blood ran cold. "That's a lie." "Maybe," Reed said, sipping his coffee. "But it's our word against yours. And around here, We win. Her breath caught. It wasn't just bias, it was deliberate. They were fabricating a case against her, knowing the system would back them up. "Enjoy your stay, Miss Lawyer," Reed sneered before walking away, whistling a cheery tune. Kendra slumped back against the cold cinderblock wall, mind racing. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone trapped in a system designed to break them. If she couldn't fight her way out, how many others would suffer the same fate? What do you think? Was Officer Reed's abuse of power inevitable in a town like this? Comment number 1 if you believe Kendra should fight back. Like this video and subscribe for more stories about standing up against injustice. But how can Kendra fight the system when every path forward seems blocked? And just how far are they willing to go to silence her? The cold of the cell seeped into Kendra's bones as night fell over the small-town jail. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, Reed's smug grin flashed behind her eyelids, followed by the image of Earl's triumphant smirk at the gas station. But anger wouldn't win this fight, strategy would. And if there was one thing Kendra Lawson knew how to do, it was build an airtight defense under pressure. Around midnight, the clatter of keys echoed down the hall. A young officer, barely out of his 20s, unlocked the cell door. His name, "Tag Reed Carter." "Stretch your legs, Lawson," he muttered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. 10 minutes in the common area, don't make me regret this." Kendra stood, wrists stiff from the hours spent in cuffs. "Why the sudden kindness?" Carter shrugged. "Not everyone here thinks Reed's a hero." That was enough for her. She nodded in gratitude and stepped into the dimly lit corridor. Across the hall, the Latina woman, Maria, stared blankly at the wall, arms wrapped around herself. "Any word on your situation?" Kendra asked quietly, approaching her bench. Maria blinked as if waking from a daze. "No, they said my landlord's pressing charges for trespassing." "How do you trespass in your own home?" "You don't," Kendra said firmly. "You fight it. Do you have a lawyer?" Maria let out a hollow laugh. "You're looking at..." Her public defender didn't even ask my side of the story, just told me to take the plea and move on. Kendra's jaw tightened. This wasn't incompetence, it was systemic neglect. "Give me the details, every word." While Carter kept watch, Maria explained how her landlord, Peter Langley, a prominent property owner in the area, had shown up with an eviction notice, claiming lease violations. She'd presented receipts for her rent payments, but the deputy who arrived sided with Langley without question. Within hours, she was in cuffs. Kendra's mind worked furiously. Fabricated charges, absent defense, swift eviction. This wasn't random. It was a pattern. Carter cleared his throat. "Time's up." As Kendra returned to her cell, an idea took shape. She couldn't just defend herself. She had to expose the system fueling these abuses. But first, she needed resources. "Can I make my phone call now?" she asked, voice sharp with determination. Carter hesitated, then nodded. "One call, make it count." The payphone receiver was cold against her ear as she dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Tanya, Miller speaking." Relief washed over Kendra. "Tanya, it's me. I need your help." There was a pause, then Tanya's voice hardened. "Kendra, what the hell is going on? I saw your name in an overnight arrest report. Are you okay?" "Not." "Really?" Kendra admitted, glancing toward the desk where Reed now sat, feet propped up, sipping coffee like he'd already won. "I'm in Griffin County. Got arrested for disturbing the peace after calling out a racist store clerk. But it's deeper than that. They're falsifying records, intimidating tenants, and pushing people out of their homes. I've got one woman in here who was arrested after being evicted from her own apartment." Tanya cursed under her breath. "That town's got a reputation, but I didn't think it was this bad. Are they letting you represent yourself?" "Judge Harrington's presiding," Kendra said. "You know what that means." Tanya's silence spoke volumes. Judge Harrington was infamous for siding with law enforcement and local businesses, especially when the defendants were people of color. "Listen," Kendra continued, lowering her voice. "I need case law on unlawful evictions, patterns of misconduct by Langley and his associates, and any complaints filed against Officer Reed." "Can you dig?" Tanya didn't hesitate. "I'm on it, but Kendra, be careful. If they're this bold, they won't back down quietly." "I don't plan to be quiet either," Kendra replied. Email everything to my personal account. I'll access it as soon as I can. As she hung up, Reed sauntered over, twirling his keys. Who'd you call? Your boyfriend? Mama? Kendra smiled thinly. My office. I figured I'd let the Department of Justice know what Griffin County's been up to. Reed's smirk faltered just for a second. Then he leaned in, voice low and venomous. You think flashing that fancy title's gonna scare us? Lady, you're just another mouthy outsider. And around here, mouths get shut. He jingled the keys mockingly and walked away. Back in her cell, Kendra sat on the hard bench, mind racing. She had one night to prepare for court. No laptop, no law books, just her memory and determination. So she did what she'd been trained to do. She built her case in her head, step by step, point by point. She rehearsed cross-examinations, anticipating Reed's lies and Miles's smug prosecution tactics. She visualized each argument, each objection, until the sun rose and Officer Carter returned for morning rounds. But before Carter could unlock her cell, another officer, older, heavier, with a sour expression, stormed down the hall, waving a piece of paper. Who the hell called in a federal inquiry? He barked, eyes locking onto Kendra. Kendra stood, slowly, her face calm despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. I did. The officer cursed and turned to Reed, who'd just entered the station. We got a problem. Reed's face darkened. He stalked over to Kendra's cell, gripping the bar so tightly his knuckles turned white. You think you're smart? He hissed. Think calling your Fed buddies'll change anything? This is our town. You'll learn that real soon. Kendra didn't blink. We'll see whose town it really is once the truth comes out. Reed stepped back, breathing heavily. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. As the clock ticked toward her first court appearance, Kendra knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about exposing the system that thrived on fear and silence, and she was done being silent. The sun barely crested the horizon when the clang of metal keys jolted Kendra awake. Officer Carter stood at her cell door, his face tight with something between pity and warning. Court's in 30 minutes, he muttered. Get ready. Kendra ran a hand down her face, shaking off the stiffness of a sleepless night. Her mind was sharp, though. She'd spent every moment preparing arguments, anticipating objections, and crafting a defense without paper or pen. She didn't need notes. She had experience. But experience didn't change the fact that this wasn't just a trial. It was an ambush. The walk to the courthouse was short but suffocating. Reed strutted beside her, cuffs clinking around her wrists. Hope you enjoyed your beauty rest, he sneered. Judge Harrington doesn't take kindly to cocky defendants, especially ones like you. Kendra didn't bite. She'd seen men like Reed in countless courtrooms, drunk on power, confident the system would always protect them. But this time, she wasn't just defending herself. She was about to expose them all. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick, with quiet hostility. The wooden benches were half filled with locals, older white residents mostly exchanging whispers and pointed glances. Kendra caught fragments of conversation as she was led past. One of them, thinking she can win. Here, bet she cracks before lunch. Just another loudmouth needs to be taught a lesson. The prosecutor, Ethan Miles, stood near the judge's bench, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He glanced up, saw Kendra, and smiled like a man already counting his victory. Good. Morning, Miss Lawson, Miles drawled, adjusting his tie. Representing yourself, I see. Bold, foolish, but bold. Kendra met his gaze evenly. I've faced worse odds. His smile widened. Not here, you haven't. Judge Harrington entered, his robe billowing as he took his seat. He was an older white man with thinning gray hair and an expression carved from years of delivering rulings that favored power over justice. He barely glanced at Kendra as he spoke. Let's get this over with, Harrington grumbled, flipping through a folder. Case number 2024-1135, State of Georgia versus Kendra Lawson. Disturbing the peace, resisting arrest. Prosecution, you may proceed. Miles stood, exuding confidence. Your Honor, the facts here are as clear as daylight. Miss Lawson was observed causing a disturbance at Ralph's Mart, verbally accosting both the clerk and other patrons. When Officer Reed arrived, she refused to comply with lawful instructions, resulting in her arrest. We have multiple witness statements confirming her behavior. He handed a stack of papers to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. Harrington skimmed them, nodding slowly. Kendra stood. Your Honor, the prosecution is relying on fabricated witness statements. I request the opportunity to cross-examine the witnesses under oath. Harrington barely looked at her. Denied. The witness statements are sworn affidavits. That's sufficient. Kendra's heart sank, but she didn't let it show. Then I'd like to introduce surveillance footage from Ralph's Mart, which will contradict those statements. Miles smirked. Funny thing, Your Honor, the store's surveillance system just happened to malfunction during the incident. No footage available. Kendra's fists clenched at her sides. Of course. Conveniently. Missing evidence. Classic small-town cover-up. Then I request access to Officer Reed's body cam footage, Kendra countered, voice steady despite the fury boiling inside her. Miles didn't even flinch. Bodycam was accidentally deactivated during the encounter. The judge nodded without hesitation. That happens sometimes. Proceed, Mr. Miles. It was like watching a rigged game play out in slow motion. Every objection she raised was shut down. Every piece of potential evidence conveniently erased or discredited before it could see daylight. Maria, the woman Kendra had met in the holding cell, was called as a prosecution witness. She walked in, stiffly, eyes flickering toward Officer Reed, who stood near the back of the courtroom with his arms crossed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough. Miss Ramirez, Miles began smoothly. You were present during the incident at Ralph's Mart. Can you confirm that you witnessed Miss Lawson arguing with the store clerk and refusing to leave? Maria hesitated, eyes darting to Kendra, then Reed. Her lips parted, but the words came out hollow. Yes, that's what I saw. Kendra's breath caught. They'd gotten to her, threatened her, most likely. It didn't matter that Maria had told her the truth the night before. Fear was a powerful tool. No further questions, Miles said, satisfied. The judge turned to Kendra. Cross-examination? Kendra rose, heels clicking against the polished wood floor as she approached Maria. The woman wouldn't meet her eyes. Miss Ramirez, Kendra began gently. How long have you lived in Griffin County? Maria swallowed hard. 12 years. And in those 12 years, have you ever had legal issues before this week? No, Maria whispered. Kendra nodded. Did anyone from law enforcement speak to you after you were arrested? A flicker of panic crossed Maria's face. She darted a glance toward Reed, who didn't move. I don't remember, Maria stammered. Kendra leaned in slightly, voice soft but firm. Miss Ramirez, you told me last night that you were arrested while trying to re-enter your own apartment, that you had proof of payment for rent. Is that true? Miles was on his feet instantly. Objection. Relevance. Goes to credibility, Your Honor, Kendra countered. Harrington waved, dismissively. Sustained. Move along, Miss Lawson. Kendra's teeth ground together. No further questions. The rest of the trial moved like a freight train with no brakes. Witness after witness parroted the same story. Kendra had been aggressive, disrespectful, disruptive. Every time she tried to introduce evidence, it was ruled inadmissible. Every objection was overruled without so much as a glance in her direction. When the prosecution rested, the judge turned to Kendra. Do you wish to present a defense? I do, Your Honor. Make it quick, Harrington grunted. Kendra stood, smoothing her blazer. Your Honor, I've spent my career upholding the law. I know what justice looks like, and this? She gestured around the courtroom. This is not justice. This is a coordinated effort to silence voices that challenge power. The prosecution's entire case relies on statements from individuals with clear biases and without supporting evidence. There's no body cam footage, no surveillance video, just words from men who see my presence here as a threat. Miles laughed quietly, shaking his head, but Kendra pressed on. I'm not asking for special treatment, I'm asking for fairness, for the chance to prove the truth, not just for myself, but for every person who's been steamrolled by a system that values convenience over conscience. The judge looked bored. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his gavel lightly against the desk. "Is that your defense, Miss Lawson?" he asked, tone dripping with condescension. "A speech about injustice?" Kendra's jaw clenched. "It's the truth." "Truth doesn't win cases," Harrington replied coldly. "Evidence does. And you don't have any." He turned to the jury, all white, all stone-faced. "You've heard the arguments," Harrington said. "I'll give you an hour to deliberate." Kendra sat down, heart pounding. She already knew what the verdict would be. This wasn't a trial. It was theater, and the ending had been scripted long before she walked into that courtroom. The jury returned in less than 20 minutes. The foreman, a man in his 60s with a Confederate flag pin on his lapel, stood and cleared his throat. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Kendra Lawson, guilty on all counts." The gavel fell like the crack of a whip. Judge Harrington didn't even look up as he spoke. "Sentencing will be tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned." As the crowd murmured and the bailiff moved to escort her back into custody, Kendra caught Miles's eye. He was smiling, triumphant. "Better luck next time," he mouthed. Kendra didn't smile back, because she wasn't done, not by a long shot. Do you believe the system was ever designed to give Kendra a fair trial? Comment number 1 if you think the verdict was inevitable. Like this video, and subscribe for more stories exposing injustice. But what happens when you back a fighter like Kendra into a corner? Can the system withstand the pressure when the truth finally comes to light? The clang of the cell door echoed through the holding area as Kendra was shoved back into confinement. The stale air of the small room felt heavier now, thick with the bitter taste of injustice. Guilty. The word rang in her ears, not because it was unexpected, but because of how effortlessly the system had steamrolled the truth. This wasn't just a loss, it was a warning, a message. Know your place. Officer Reed sauntered down the hallway, keys jingling with each arrogant step. He stopped in front of her cell, grinning like a man who just won a bet. "Well, miss, fancy lawyer," he drawled, arms crossed over his broad chest. "Didn't go quite how you planned, huh? Thought you'd waltz in here, throw around some big city legal jargon and walk out like a hero?" Kendra didn't answer. She refused to give him the satisfaction. His smile widened. "I gotta say, watching you squirm up there, best entertainment I've had all week." He tossed a crumpled piece of paper through the bars. It landed at her feet. Kendra hesitated, then picked it up. Scrawled in sloppy handwriting were the words, "Drop the appeal or things get worse." Her grip tightened around the note. "Is this supposed to scare me?" Reed chuckled. "Nah, not scare, just educate. You know, around here, folks who don't learn their lesson tend to have accidents. Slippery floors, broken taillights, misunderstandings. Real shame, really." Kendra stepped closer to the bars, her face inches from his. "You think threats will break me? I've faced men scarier than you, Reed. The difference? They were smart enough to cover their tracks." His eyes darkened, but before he could respond, the station phone rang, echoing down the corridor. He glanced toward the desk, muttered a curse, and swaggered off to answer it. Kendra sank onto the narrow bench, heart pounding. She needed to think. Fast. The conviction wasn't just about her, it was a warning shot to anyone who dared to challenge the power structure in Griffin County. But warnings cut both ways. If they were this desperate to silence her, it meant she was close to something worth hiding. The sound of footsteps drew her attention. Officer Carter, the young guard who'd shown her a sliver of decency the night before, appeared at her cell looking nervous. "Lawson," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "You got another call. 5 minutes, make it count." Kendra didn't waste time. He unlocked the cell and she hurried to the payphone on the wall. The dial tone buzzed in her ear as she punched in Tanya Miller's number. "It rang once, twice, Kendra." Tanya's voice snapped through the line, sharp with concern. "I just saw the verdict. What the hell happened?" "Exactly what we expected," Kendra replied, keeping her voice low. "The judge blocked every piece of evidence I tried to introduce. The jury was stacked. The witnesses coached. It was a performance and the script was written before I stepped foot in that courtroom." Tanya cursed quietly. "I'm pulling everything I can on Harrington, Miles, and Reed, but the paper trail's thin. These guys know how to cover their tracks. Then we need something they can't bury, Kendra said, mind racing. Did you find anything on the housing scheme Maria mentioned? Peter Langley's evictions? There was a pause, then the sound of keys clacking furiously. Hold on, got something. Multiple complaints filed against Langley for illegal evictions, all dismissed by the same judge, Harrington. And get this, Langley's company made several large donations to Harrington's re-election campaign last year. The dots are connecting. Kendra's jaw tightened. That's enough to start shaking the tree. Get that to the DOJ. If we can't fight them here, we'll fight them from above. Carter cleared his throat, tapping his watch. Time's up. Tanya, Kendra said quickly, I need one more thing. Get someone to check on my mom. Quietly. If they're willing to threaten me, they won't hesitate to use her as leverage. On it, Tanya promised. Stay safe. They're cornered, and cornered animals bite. Kendra hung up and let Carter escort her back to the cell. As she passed Reed at the front desk, he gave her an exaggerated wink. Sleep tight, Lawson. Big day tomorrow, sentencing and all. She didn't flinch. Better enjoy the smugness while you can, Reed. Your turn's coming. His grin slipped just for a second. It was enough. Back in her cell, Kendra sat down and exhaled slowly, steadying her nerves. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The system was corrupt, but corruption bred arrogance, and arrogance led to mistakes. She just had to wait for them to make the next one. As midnight approached, she lay down on the cold bench, eyes fixed on the flickering light overhead. Somewhere outside, in the dark corners of Griffin County, powerful men were scheming, convinced they'd won. They hadn't. Not yet. The sun barely pierced the grey morning sky when the guards yanked Kendra from her cell. Her sentencing hearing wasn't scheduled until the afternoon, but Officer Reed had other plans. He grinned as he tightened the cuffs around her wrists, yanking her forward with unnecessary force. Hope you practiced your plea for mercy, Reed sneered, guiding her toward the courthouse. Not that it'll matter. Harrington's got a special kind of sentence lined up for smart mouths like you. Kendra didn't flinch. She'd faced worse. And thanks to Tanya's late-night findings, she had ammunition. Langley's illegal evictions, Judge Harrington's campaign donations, and Reed's suspicious reports, it was enough to start prying open the cracks in their facade. But she had to survive today first. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick with anticipation. The same crowd, as yesterday, had gathered, locals who thrived on seeing someone like Kendra put in her place. She spotted Maria Ramirez sitting near the back, her face pale and anxious. Reed must have gotten to her again. The weight of intimidation hung heavy over everyone who dared to speak the truth. Ethan Miles, the smug prosecutor, stood by the bench, chatting casually with Judge Harrington like they were old friends. Because they were. Griffin County was nothing if not predictable. All rise, the bailiff called as Harrington entered, his black robe flowing behind him like a king taking his throne. Let's get this circus over with, Harrington grunted, dropping into his chair. His eyes barely flickered toward Kendra as she was led to the defense table. Miss Lawson, you requested to address the court before sentencing. Make it quick. Kendra stood, wrists still cuffed in front of her. She didn't ask for them to be removed. Let them see her shackled. Let the image burn. Your Honor, she began, voice steady. This case isn't about disturbing the peace. It's about disturbing the status quo. I wasn't arrested for arguing with a store clerk. I was arrested for refusing to bow to a system designed to silence people who look like me. Harrington sighed loudly, but Kendra pressed on. I've uncovered evidence linking Officer Reed, Prosecutor Miles, and Mr. Peter Langley to a pattern of illegal evictions targeting minority tenants. So I've forwarded those findings to the Department of Justice. That got their attention. Miles's smug grin faltered, and Reed, standing by the door, stiffened like a snake ready to strike. The affidavits presented by the prosecution were obtained under duress, Kendra continued. Maria Ramirez, the state's witness, was threatened with additional charges if she didn't testify against me. Maria's head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. Kendra held her gaze. Now's the time, her look said. Stand up, or they'll keep doing this to you and everyone else. Objection. Miles barked, slamming his hand on the table. Unsubstantiated accusations meant to distract from sentencing. Sustained, Judge Harrington muttered. Wrap it up, Miss Lawson. Kendra took a breath. This town has operated under the assumption that silence equals control. But silence is breaking. The DOJ's investigation is underway. This trial, it's not just about me anymore. Harrington's face darkened. Enough. Sit down. Mr. Miles, any further comments before sentencing? Miles stood, smoothing his tie. Only that the defendant has shown nothing but contempt for this court and the rule of law. I recommend the maximum sentence. The judge nodded, like it was already decided, because it was. Very well. Wait. A voice rang out from the back. Maria Ramirez stood, trembling but determined. I lied yesterday. They made me lie. Miss Lawson didn't do anything wrong. Officer Reed said if I didn't back their story, they'd charge me with trespassing again and take my kids away. The room erupted. Miles paled. Harrington slammed his gavel, and Reed surged forward. Sit down, Ramirez, or you'll regret. Hit, Reed snapped. But the damage was done. The truth was out. Kendra met Maria's eyes, silently thanking her for her courage. It was the first crack in the wall. Now she had to widen it. Your Honor, Kendra said calmly, in light of this new testimony, I move to dismiss the charges and open an inquiry into prosecutorial and law enforcement misconduct. Harrington's face twisted with fury. Denied, bailiff removed the defendant from the courtroom. Two officers rushed toward Kendra, but she didn't resist. She'd planted the seed. Now it was only a matter of time, as they dragged her out. Kendra caught Miles's eye. His earlier confidence had vanished, replaced by something closer to fear. The tide was turning. Do you think Maria did the right thing by speaking out, despite the risks? Comment number 1 if you support her. Bravery, like this video, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the fight for justice. But now that the truth is exposed, how far will the corrupt system go to protect itself? And can Kendra survive the backlash that's sure to come? The heavy slam of the cell door echoed in Kendra's ears as she stumbled inside. Her wrists raw from the handcuffs. Officer Reed didn't bother hiding his satisfaction as he locked the door, keys jingling like a victory bell. Big speech you gave back there, Lawson? He sneered, leaning against the bars. Thought you'd break the system wide open, huh? Newsflash, you just made things worse for yourself. Kendra sat down slowly, refusing to let him see her frustration. She'd expected retaliation, but Maria's bold confession had been worth it. The truth was out now, and once it was out, it was hard to bury. Reed could gloat all he wanted. He was standing on crumbling ground. Enjoy the view while you can, Reed, she muttered, stretching her aching shoulders. Because when you fall, it'll be fast and hard. His smirk faltered for half a second, but he recovered quickly. Fall? Lady, you don't get it. This is our town. No fancy law degree changes that. He stalked away, boots thudding against the concrete floor, leaving Kendra alone with the buzzing fluorescent light overhead. Her mind raced. Maria's confession was powerful, but the judge had dismissed it like an annoying fly. Without hard evidence to back her up, it was her word against a system built to protect itself. And then, as if the universe answered her silent plea, the cell block phone rang. The night guard, Carter, the only one with a shred of decency, answered, then glanced her way. Lawson, he called, unlocking the cell door. You've got a call. It's urgent. Heart pounding, Kendra hurried to the phone. Tanya? She asked. Barely breathing. Yeah, it's me. Tanya's voice snapped through the line, sharp and urgent. I've got something. You were right about Langley. He's been running a housing scam for years. Illegal evictions, falsified lease violations, and bribing city inspectors to sign off on unlivable properties. Guess who's been covering for him? Kendra's fingers tightened around the phone. Let me guess. Judge Harrington. Bingo, Tanya confirmed. Campaign donations, personal favors, even a private hunting trip they took together last fall. I've sent everything to the DOJ. They're interested, but they need a local complaint to trigger an investigation. Can you get someone to file? Kendra's mind raced. Maria. She could file a complaint as a direct victim. But getting Maria back into the courthouse after what had just happened, that was a risk. "I'll find someone," Kendra said. "Get everything ready. We don't have much time." As she hung up, Carter eyed her warily. "What's going on?" "Justice," Kendra replied, stepping back into her cell, or at least the start of it. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with tension. News of Maria's confession had spread, but without official action, the system held firm. Judge Harrington entered the courtroom with the same dismissive glare, and Miles stood beside him, smug and confident. "Let's get this circus finished," Harrington muttered. "Miss Lawson, any last words before sentencing?" Kendra stood, spine straight despite the exhaustion weighing her down. "Yes, Your Honor," she said calmly. "I move to introduce new evidence." Miles barked a laugh. "Really? You tried that yesterday and it got you nowhere." Kendra didn't blink. "This time I have supporting documentation, emails, bank statements, and recorded complaints linking Peter Langley's eviction scheme to campaign contributions made to your re-election fund, Judge Harrington." The room froze. Harrington's gavel hovered in the air, his face blanching. "What the hell are you talking about?" Kendra reached into the envelope Carter had slipped her that morning. "Tanya's evidence. Printed and organized. These documents show a clear pattern of corruption, Your Honor. And under Rule 3.5 of the Judicial Code of Conduct, I'm formally requesting your recusal from this case." Gasps rippled through the room. Harrington's hand trembled as he gripped the gavel tighter. "This is outrageous! Bailiff, confiscate those papers!" The bailiff hesitated, eyes flicking toward the evidence. He wasn't sure who to obey. Kendra seized the moment. "I've already sent copies to the DOJ," she announced. "Confiscating them won't make a difference. The wheels are already turning." For the first time since her arrest, Kendra saw true panic in Harrington's eyes. He looked to Miles, but the prosecutor stepped back, shaking his head. This wasn't a battle he wanted to fight anymore. Harrington slammed his gavel down. "This court is adjourned." But the damage was done. As the judge stormed out, Kendra felt a flicker of hope spark deep in her chest. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time since she'd been dragged into this nightmare, the tide was turning in her favor, and the men who thought they owned Griffin County were about to learn what happened when you pushed the wrong woman too far. The gavel's echo still hung in the air as the courtroom emptied, leaving Kendra standing alone beside the defense table, her wrists red from the handcuffs that hadn't been removed. Judge Harrington had stormed out, face pale, sweat dotting his forehead. Miles had followed, his usual smugness replaced by cold, calculating silence. The tide had shifted, but not the way Kendra had hoped. Exposing corruption didn't mean justice would follow, not here, not yet. Officer Reed appeared at her side, his grip tightening painfully on her arm. "Think you're clever, huh?" he hissed, hauling her toward the side exit. "Throwing dirt at the judge? All you did was dig your own grave." Kendra didn't respond. She was too busy calculating her next move. The DOJ had the documents, but without an official complaint from a victim like Maria, the investigation could stall. And if there was one thing she'd learned about Griffin County, it was that people like Harrington and Langley didn't fall quietly. Reed shoved her into the back of the patrol car, slamming the door harder than necessary. Through the barred window, she watched as Miles stood on the courthouse steps, phone pressed to his ear. His face was tight, lips moving fast. He wasn't calling to concede, he was calling to regroup. Back at the station, Kendra was thrown into the same cold cell she'd spent the last few nights in. The fluorescent light overhead flickered like a dying heartbeat. Officer Carter appeared moments later, face drawn, his usual cautious kindness replaced by pure exhaustion. "Phone call," he muttered, unlocking the cell. "Make it quick, they're pissed." Kendra didn't waste time. She dialed Tanya's number. Her fingers steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. It rang once, twice, then, "Kendra?" Tanya's voice was sharp, urgent. "What the hell happened? I just got word the judge dismissed your motion and called for immediate sentencing. They're trying to bury this before the DOJ can act." Kendra closed her eyes, inhaling slowly. "I figured as much. What about Langley? Any movement on his end?" Tanya cursed under her breath. "That's the other problem. Langley filed a harassment complaint against you. claiming you tried to extort him with false accusations. It's flimsy as hell, but in this town, flimsy's enough. Kendra's grip on the receiver tightened. They weren't just playing defense, they were going on the offensive. She was no longer just a nuisance, she was a threat. And they were treating her accordingly. "Get me one thing," Kendra said quietly. "I need Maria Ramirez to file her official complaint. Without her, the DOJ won't move fast enough." Tanya hesitated. "Kendra, Maria's terrified. She's already gotten eviction threats. If she steps up now, they'll destroy her." "They'll destroy her either way," Kendra replied, voice firm. "If we don't fight now, Langley and Harrington keep grinding people like her under their heels. Tell her I'll stand with her, whatever it takes." A long silence stretched over the line. Then Tanya exhaled sharply. "All right, I'll talk to her. But you need to be ready, they're not done with you yet." As Kendra hung up, Carter hovered nearby, eyes flicking toward the surveillance camera in the corner. "You made some powerful enemies," he muttered, unlocking the cell door. "Reed's been bragging about how they're going to make sure you disappear into the system, transfer you to a state facility, lose the paperwork, bury you in bureaucracy." Kendra's heart skipped. She'd seen it happen before. In corrupt jurisdictions, inconvenient prisoners often found themselves misplaced in the system, shuffled from jail to jail until they faded from memory. "Thanks for the warning," she said quietly, stepping back into the cell. "But I'm not disappearing, not today." Carter hesitated, then nodded once before locking the door behind her. The night dragged on. Every noise in the hallway sounded like the beginning of another setup, a staged incident, an unscheduled transfer, maybe even worse, but nothing came. Just the flicker of the light, the buzz of the heating system, and the dull throb of fatigue behind her eyes. At dawn, the sharp clang of metal jolted her awake. Officer Reed stood at the cell door, grinning like a man who'd already won the war. "Rise and shine, counselor," he sneered. "Judge moved up your sentencing. Looks like today's your lucky day." Kendra didn't move. She held his gaze unflinching. "Lucky for who, Reed? Because from where I'm standing, your little empire's starting to crack." His smile faltered. Just for a second, but it was enough. As she was led through the station, her mind raced. Maria's complaint could still turn the tide. But if sentencing happened first, if Harrington slammed down the gavel and shipped her off to state custody, everything would stall. The corruption would settle back into place, thicker and stronger than before. And that's when the front door burst open. Tanya Miller strode in, flanked by two men in dark suits, federal agents, badges glinting in the morning light. Behind them, Maria Ramirez stood clutching a folder, her face pale but determined. "I'm here to file an official complaint," Maria announced, voice trembling but clear. "Against Peter Langley and Judge Harrington." The entire station froze. Reed's grip on Kendra's arm tightened, then loosened as the lead agent held up a federal warrant. "Step away from Miss Lawson," the agent ordered. "We're here under the authority of the Department of Justice. This station is now under federal review." Reed's face twisted with rage. "You can't do that. This is Griffin County jurisdiction." "Not anymore," the agent interrupted. "This jurisdiction is compromised. Hands where we can see them." As Reed reluctantly stepped back, Kendra met Tanya's gaze, heart pounding with relief. They'd done it. The wall had cracked, and now it was crumbling. But victory wasn't guaranteed. Not yet. Langley, Harrington, Miles, they wouldn't fall, quietly. And the next move. It would be the most dangerous one yet. Do you think Maria made the right choice, risking everything to file that complaint? Comment number 1 if you believe standing up for justice is worth the risk. Like this video. And subscribe for more stories exposing corruption and fighting back. But with the system exposed and powerful men cornered, how far will they go to protect themselves? Can Kendra survive the backlash that's sure to come? The courthouse was buzzing like a disturbed beehive when Kendra stepped out of the holding cell, flanked by 2 federal agents. Officer Reed was nowhere in sight, but his absence didn't comfort her. Men like him didn't retreat. They regrouped. Tanya hurried alongside her, phone in hand, eyes darting around the hallway. "The DOJ confirmed they've opened an official inquiry," she whispered. "Harrington's under review, Langley's assets are being flagged. and the complaints are piling up. Kendra nodded, adjusting the cuffs of her blazer, borrowed from a sympathetic court clerk after the feds ordered her release from county custody. But they haven't fallen yet. Tanya's jaw tightened. Not yet. But we rattled the cage. They entered the courtroom, and the hum of whispered conversations cut off like a switch. Every seat was filled, locals, reporters, and courthouse staff, all drawn by the scent of scandal. Miles stood at the prosecutor's table, his usual smugness wiped clean, replaced by a brittle mask of control. Judge Harrington sat high on the airy bench, but his face was tight, pale like a man bracing for impact. "Court is now in session," the bailiff called, voice cracking under the weight of the moment. Harrington banged his gavel once, hard. "Let's proceed. Sentencing for case number 2024-1135, State of Georgia versus Kendra Lawson." Kendra stood, her posture unyielding. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room, but she didn't shrink. Not now. Not ever. "Miss Lawson," Harrington began, his voice strained, "you have been found guilty of disturbing the peace and resisting arrest. Given the seriousness of these offenses and your refusal to accept responsibility, I see no reason for leniency." The words rolled out mechanically, like a man trying to cling to a script while the stage collapsed around him. "Your Honor," Kendra interrupted, stepping forward. "Before sentencing, I move for dismissal based on prosecutorial misconduct and judicial conflict of interest." Harrington's eyes flared. "Motion denied. Sit down, Miss Lawson." "I'm not finished," Kendra shot back, voice rising. "The Department of Justice has opened an inquiry into this court's handling of cases involving minorities, particularly those tied to Peter Langley's housing developments. There is credible evidence that eviction complaints were falsified, tenants were unlawfully removed, and local law enforcement, namely Officer Reed, acted as enforcers for Langley's schemes." Gasps rippled through the room. Miles shifted uncomfortably, sweat glistening on his brow. He glanced toward Harrington, who gripped the edge of his bench so tightly his knuckles turned white. "This court," Kendra continued, "has demonstrated clear bias and a failure to uphold justice. I am requesting an immediate stay of sentencing, pending the outcome of the federal investigation." Harrington slammed the gavel down so hard it echoed like a gunshot. "Enough! This is my courtroom, Miss Lawson. You don't dictate the proceedings here." Kendra didn't flinch. "Respectfully, Your Honor, you're wrong. When corruption taints the bench, it ceases to be your courtroom. It becomes a crime scene." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, the door at the back of the courtroom creaked open. A stern-faced federal agent entered, followed by two uniformed officers. The agent held up a document. "Judge Harrington," the agent announced, voice calm but unyielding, "under the authority of the Department of Justice, you are hereby ordered to recuse yourself from these proceedings, effective immediately. An independent review panel has been appointed to oversee any further actions in this case." Harrington froze, mouth opening and closing like a fish yanked from water. The gavel slipped from his hand, clattering against the desk. I, he stammered, before slumping back into his chair, defeated. The agent didn't wait for a response. "Bailiff, please escort the judge from the bench." The room erupted. Reporters scrambled for photos, locals whispered in shock, and Miles visibly paled. He turned toward the exit, but another agent stepped into his path. "Mr. Miles," the agent said coolly, holding up another warrant. "We need to have a conversation. Now." As Harrington was led away, his face twisted into something between rage and despair. Kendra exhaled slowly. The weight on her chest didn't lift entirely. There were still battles ahead. But this was a victory. Tanya appeared beside her, eyes wide. "I can't believe it. We actually did it." Kendra gave a tired smile. "Not done yet, but we're close." Across the room, Maria Ramirez sat quietly, clutching the copy of her official complaint. She met Kendra's gaze and nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of shared courage. And standing near the exit, partially obscured by the crowd, was Officer Reed. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face was cold, calculating. And then he was gone, slipping out the side door without a word. Kendra's gut twisted. The system might be cracking, but the most dangerous players weren't out of the game yet. The question now was simple. How far would they go to protect what was left of their empire? The courthouse steps were swarming with reporters as Kendra exited, Tanya close behind. Microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing, voices overlapping with questions. Miss Lawson, how does it feel to have Judge Harrington removed from the bench? You think Peter Langley will face charges next? Was your arrest part of a larger cover-up? Kendra kept walking, jaw tight. There was no time for victory laps. Harrington was down, but the system that propped him up was far from broken. And men, like Reed, they didn't lick their wounds quietly. Tanya leaned in as they pushed through the crowd. We need to get you somewhere safe. I don't like how quiet it's been since the judge got pulled. Kendra nodded, her instincts screaming the same warning. She pulled out her phone, dialing her mother's number. It rang once, twice, straight to voicemail. Her stomach dropped. Tanya, my mom's not answering. Tanya froze. You think? I don't think, Kendra cut in, already flagging down a passing federal agent. I know. The drive to her mother's house was tense, sirens off. The black SUV weaving through side streets to avoid attention. When they pulled up, everything looked normal, too normal. The porch light was on, the front door closed, but the curtains, usually drawn in the evening, were wide open. Stay here, Kendra ordered, ignoring Tanya's protest as she climbed out, adrenaline pounding in her veins. She approached the house slowly, scanning for movement. Nothing. Hand hovering near the pepper spray in her coat pocket, she stepped onto the porch and knocked. Silence. Mom? Kendra called, trying the knob. It turned easily. Unlocked. Her heart hammered. Something was wrong. Her mother never left the door unlocked. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was dark, except for the glow from the kitchen light. Plates sat untouched on the dining table, 2 glasses of iced tea sweating beside them. Dinner interrupted. Mom? She called again, voice tightening. It's me. Where are you? A floorboard creaked behind her. Kendra spun around, just as a shadow lunged from the hallway. She barely had time to react before a rough hand clamped over her mouth, dragging her backward. She kicked, twisted, but the grip was iron. Thought you were smart, huh? A familiar voice hissed in her ear. Officer Reed. His breath was hot and rancid against her skin. You think taking down Harrington means you won? Lady, you don't even know what game you're playing. Kendra bit down hard on his hand. He cursed, loosening his grip just enough for her to twist free. She stumbled forward, grabbing the nearest object, a ceramic vase, and hurled it at him. It shattered against his shoulder, staggering him. Where's my mother? She demanded, backing toward the kitchen. Reed wiped blood from his lip, eyes gleaming with malice. Safe, for now. Depends on how cooperative you feel. Kendra's mind raced. He was bluffing. He had to be. If they'd already taken her mother, he wouldn't bother negotiating. Here's how this works, Reed continued, advancing slowly. You're gonna call your fancy DOJ friends and tell them you lied. Say you fabricated the evidence. You do that and maybe your mama gets to sleep in her own bed tonight. Kendra's hand found the edge of the kitchen counter. Her phone was there, buzzing silently with missed calls from Tanya. And beside it, the heavy cast iron skillet. Her mother always kept on the stove. She made her decision in an instant. You want me to call the DOJ? She said, voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. Fine, let me grab my phone. Reed smiled like a man already tasting victory. He nodded toward the counter. Slow, no funny business. Kendra stepped sideways, reaching for the phone with one hand while her other curled around the skillet handle. Reed's eyes stayed on the phone, not the weapon. The moment her fingers closed around the cold metal, she swung with every ounce of strength she had. The skillet connected with the side of his head with a sickening crack. Reed's eyes rolled back as he staggered, then collapsed like a felled tree, unconscious before he hit the floor. Breathing hard, Kendra didn't waste a second. She snatched her phone and dialed Tanya. Get the feds here. Now, she panted. Reed's, down, and I don't know where my mom is. Tanya didn't ask questions. On it, stay put, backup's 5 minutes out, 5 minutes, an eternity. Kendra knelt beside Reed, searching his pockets. Handcuffs, a switchblade, and a burner phone. She flipped it open, scrolling through the last messages. One stood out, sent 10 minutes earlier. Got her, moved the package. Highway 22, safe house. Her breath caught. Highway 22. That was the back road leading out of town, past the abandoned Langley warehouses. If her mother was being moved, they were. Trying to get her out before federal eyes swept the town. Sirens wailed in the distance as headlights flooded the windows. The feds had arrived, but Kendra didn't wait. She grabbed Reed's cuffs, snapped them around his wrists and sprinted. Outside as agents stormed the porch. "Reed was holding me here," she barked at the lead agent, flashing the burner phone. "But they've got my mom, Highway 22. We need to move, now." The agent didn't hesitate. "You ride with us." They tore down the darkened streets, tires screeching. As the SUV swerved onto the highway, Kendra sat in the passenger seat, eyes locked on the road ahead, fists clenched so tightly her nails bit into her palms. "How many men does Langley have left?" the agent driving asked, checking his sidearm. "Enough," Kendra muttered, "but they're desperate. That makes them sloppy." As they crested a hill, headlights flared in the distance, a black van speeding toward the county line. "There!" Kendra shouted, pointing. "Cut them off!" The agent radioed ahead, and within moments another SUV roared onto the highway from a side road, lights flashing. The van swerved, tires screeching, before slamming to a halt. Agents poured out, weapons drawn, surrounding the vehicle. "Out of the van," one shouted. "Hands where we can see them!" The back doors flew open, and two men bolted into the woods. Kendra barely noticed. Her eyes were locked on the figure being dragged from the passenger seat by an agent. "Mom!" she cried, stumbling out of the SUV before anyone could stop her. Her mother, disheveled but unharmed, broke into tears as Kendra wrapped her in a fierce embrace. "I'm okay," her mother whispered, voice shaking. "They didn't hurt me. They said it was a warning." Kendra pulled back, eyes blazing. "Warning?" They made the biggest mistake of their lives. The agents secured the scene, cuffing the remaining suspects. One of the men, pale and sweating, muttered under his breath as he was hauled past Kendra. "You think this ends here? You have no idea how deep this goes." Kendra's jaw clenched. He was right about one thing. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of an even bigger fight. The roar of engines faded as the last suspect was hauled into the waiting patrol car, red and blue lights strobing across the dark highway. Kendra stood beside her mother, one arm protectively wrapped around her shoulders, while federal agents secured the scene. Reed's burner phone buzzed in her hand, another incoming message from an unknown number. "Status, package delivered." Kendra's blood ran cold. The network hadn't collapsed with Reed's arrest. There were still players in the game, still pulling strings from the shadows, and whoever sent that message wasn't just checking in, they were giving orders. Tanya, having just arrived, jogged toward them, eyes sharp with concern. "We've got Reed in custody, and Langley's been flagged for federal detainment. But this?" She gestured to the phone in Kendra's hand. "This means someone higher up is still running the show." Kendra nodded grimly. Reed was a foot soldier, Harrington was muscle, Langley was money. But the brains? They're still out there. The lead agent, Ramirez, a stern woman with short-cropped hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, approached, glancing at the phone. "We'll trace the number, but if they realize Reed's down, they'll scatter." "Or retaliate," Kendra countered. "We can't wait. We need to hit them now while they're exposed." Ramirez hesitated. "We don't have enough for search warrants beyond Langley's properties. Anything more and it'll look like a federal overreach." Kendra glanced at the van, where the two thugs who'd taken her mother were being processed. One, a wiry man with a crooked nose, was muttering furiously under his breath. The other, stockier and younger, looked more panicked than defiant. "I don't need a warrant," Kendra said, voice cold. "I need one of them to talk." Before Ramirez could object, Kendra strode toward the younger man, ignoring the agent cuffing him. His eyes darted around, sweat slicking his forehead despite the cool night air. "Who sent you?" Kendra demanded, standing inches from his face. "Who ordered the grab?" The man swallowed hard. I don't know names. Just got a call. Said to hold the old lady until the lawyer problem went away." Kendra leaned in, voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "The lawyer problem just got worse. You want a deal? Tell me where the calls came from." He hesitated, eyes flicking, toward the crooked-nosed man who shook his head violently. But fear trumped loyalty. "There's an office," he blurted. "Old Langley warehouse, west side of town. It's not in Langley's name, though. Belongs to some shell company. That's where the calls come from." Ramirez stepped forward, scribbling notes. "We'll verify and move in." Kendra didn't budge. "No. They'll clear out the second they hear Reed's been taken. We go now." Tanya, standing nearby, nodded. "She's right. We wait. They disappear." Ramirez cursed under her breath, then clicked her radio. "All units converge on the Langley West warehouse. Move now." The convoy of federal SUVs sped through Griffin County's back roads, lights off, tires kicking up gravel. Kendra sat in the lead vehicle beside Ramirez, heart pounding in her chest. Every instinct screamed this was the moment, the final confrontation, the chance to break the cycle of corruption that had gripped this town for decades. They reached the warehouse just before dawn, the sky bruised with the first hints of morning. It sat at the edge of an industrial park, half the windows boarded up, but faint light glowed from the upper floor. Someone was home. Ramirez signaled silently, and the agents fanned out, weapons drawn. Kendra, despite Tanya's protests, moved. With them. She wasn't sitting this one out. The first team breached the side door, sweeping in like a wave. Shouts echoed inside. "Federal agents, hands up!" Followed by the unmistakable thud of bodies hitting the floor. Kendra moved toward the staircase leading to the second floor when a shadow darted across the hallway. Without thinking, she sprinted after it. "Stop!" she shouted, heels pounding against concrete. "Federal agents are everywhere. There's nowhere to run." The figure, a man in a dark suit, whipped around at the end of the hall. His face was partially obscured by the flickering light, but Kendra recognized the sharp jawline and slicked back hair instantly. Ethan Miles. Her breath caught. The prosecutor. The man who had stood in court, smug and untouchable, now looked cornered and desperate. "Drop it, Miles," Kendra ordered, spotting the pistol clutched in his hand. "It's over." Miles laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You think this ends with me? I'm a cog in the machine, Lawson. You shut me down and someone else takes my place." Kendra took a step forward, hands raised. "Maybe, but it won't be you. And every cog we pull out weakens the machine." He hesitated, gun wavering. Behind her, footsteps pounded, Ramirez and two agents closing in. Miles saw them, eyes darting wildly. "Don't do it," Kendra warned. "You fire that gun, you'll never see daylight again." For a moment, it seemed like he might surrender. Then his jaw clenched, and he swung the gun toward Kendra. Two shots rang out. Kendra flinched, expecting pain, but none came. Miles staggered backward, eyes wide, before crumpling to the ground. Blood spread across his crisp white shirt. Ramirez lowered her weapon, face grim. He made his choice. Kendra exhaled shakily, stepping over Miles's fallen body. The fight was over. The system hadn't just cracked, it had shattered. By sunrise, the warehouse was secured, evidence catalogued, and the remaining suspects taken into custody. The shell company tied directly to Langley, Harrington, and several other prominent figures in Griffin County. It was bigger than they'd imagined, a web stretching beyond the town into state politics and real estate ventures across the region. Standing outside the warehouse, the first rays of light warming her face, Kendra finally let herself breathe. Tanya appeared beside her, arms crossed. "You realize this doesn't end here, right? There'll be backlash. Power hates a vacuum." Kendra smiled faintly. "Let them come. I'm tired of playing defense." Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You made your point. Stay out of Georgia and you'll stay alive." She showed it to Tanya, who snorted. "Cowards." Kendra deleted the message. "If they think threats will work after all this, they haven't learned a damn thing." Across the lot, Maria Ramirez stood with her children, watching the agents work. She caught Kendra's eye and nodded once. Gratitude, strength, and defiance, all rolled into a single gesture. The cycle was broken. But the fight would never truly end, and Kendra Lawson was ready for it. The sun crept over the horizon as Kendra stood outside the Langley warehouse, exhaustion weighing on her like a lead blanket. The flashing lights of federal vehicles still bathed the lot in red and blue, but the chaos had quieted. Most of the suspects were in custody, handcuffed and lined up against the chain-link fence. Miles was being loaded into an ambulance, pale and unconscious, while Reed, Langley and several others were already en route to federal holding. Tanya approached, phone pressed to her ear. DOJ confirmed the takedown, the shell company running. Langley's eviction racket is being dismantled as we speak. It's over, Kendra. Kendra nodded, though the weight in her chest didn't lift. It's never really over, Tanya. This town didn't rot overnight. It won't heal overnight either. Tanya sighed, running a hand through her hair. No, but it's a start. The system's exposed. The people running it are facing charges. That's more than most get. Across the lot, Maria Ramirez stood with her 2 children, watching quietly. One of the federal agents handed her a folder, official documentation, confirming the dismissal of her trespassing charge and her reinstated tenancy. Her landlord, tied directly to Langley's corrupt network, had already been arrested. Kendra walked over, ignoring the ache in her legs. You did it, Maria. You stood up, and you won. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she clasped Kendra's hands tightly. We won. If you hadn't believed me, if you hadn't fought, they would have buried me like they've buried so many others. Kendra swallowed the lump in her throat. No one gets buried if we keep shining light in the dark places. Ramirez, the lead federal agent, joined them, flipping through a notepad. We'll need your official statements to wrap this up, but from what we've gathered, the corruption here wasn't limited to Griffin County. Langley had connections across the state, developers, judges, even state senators. This investigation's about to blow wide open. Kendra nodded. Good, make sure it does. No plea deals, no quiet settlements. Ramirez smiled thinly. You'd make a hell of a federal prosecutor, Lawson. I already am, Kendra replied, voice steady. And I'm not done yet. As the morning stretched on, the scene slowly cleared. Federal vehicles rolled out, suspects in tow, and the once intimidating warehouse stood hollow and lifeless, a fitting metaphor for the power structure they'd just dismantled. By the time Kendra returned to her mother's house, the adrenaline had worn off, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. Her mother, though shaken, was safe, sipping tea at the kitchen table like nothing had happened. You need sleep, her mother chided, eyeing the dark circles under Kendra's eyes. Not another fight. Kendra smiled faintly, pressing a kiss to her mother's forehead. Sleep can wait, justice can't. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Another unknown number. Heart pounding, she picked it up and read the message. You may have won this round, but the game never ends. Watch your back. Kendra exhaled slowly, thumb hovering over the delete button, but she didn't press it. Instead, she saved the message, flagged it, and forwarded it to Tanya. Looks like someone's still holding out, Tanya texted back almost immediately. Want me to escalate? Kendra leaned against the counter, rubbing her temples. Of course they wouldn't let go quietly. Power never surrendered without a final, desperate swing. No, she replied. Let them watch, I'm not hiding. If they come, they'll find me waiting. Her mother glanced up, noticing the tension in her face. Trouble? Nothing. New, Kendra said softly, slipping the phone into her pocket. Just the usual cowards trying to scare the truth away. Her mother's gaze softened. And what are you going to do? Kendra smiled, weary but determined. What I've always done, fight. Later that day, she sat in her office back in Atlanta, reviewing case files and preparing follow-up reports for the DOJ. The Griffin County case was closed, but the larger battle was only beginning. Corruption didn't exist in isolation. It spread like rot through the cracks of complacency, feeding on silence and fear. But silence had never been Kendra Lawson's style. As the sun dipped below the skyline, painting her office in gold and crimson, she leaned back in her chair and stared out the window. Somewhere out there, men like Langley and Harrington were realizing they weren't untouchable. And somewhere else, another woman, another family was facing the same kind of injustice she'd just torn down. Kendra didn't fool herself into thinking the fight was over. The cycle wasn't broken by one case, one victory. It was broken piece by piece, with every voice that refused to be silenced, every truth dragged into the light. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Tanya. DOJ just confirmed. Arrest warrants issued for 2 state senators tied to Langley's network. It's spreading. Kendra smiled, determination hardening her features. Good. Let it spread. Let it burn through every corrupt corner until there was nothing left but accountability and justice. She closed her laptop, stood and grabbed her coat. Tomorrow, there'd be another fight, another courtroom, another battle for those who couldn't. Fight for themselves. And Kendra Lawson would be ready, because as long as injustice existed, so would she. The story of Kendra Lawson is more than just one woman's fight against corruption. It's a stark reminder that injustice thrives where silence prevails. Griffin County wasn't unique. It was a reflection of countless communities where power remains unchecked, where systems designed to protect the vulnerable are twisted to oppress them instead. But Kendra's relentless pursuit of truth shows us one crucial lesson. Change begins when someone refuses to look the other way. Kendra didn't win because she had a title or legal expertise. She won because she refused to accept injustice as inevitable. She stood up not just for herself, but for people like Maria Ramirez, whose voices were systematically silenced. Every step Kendra took exposed another crack in the system, proving that courage, combined with persistence, can dismantle even the most fortified walls of corruption. This story also highlights the importance of community. Kendra's victory wasn't hers alone. It was fueled by allies: Tanya's relentless digging, Maria's brave testimony, Carter's quiet defiance, and the federal agents who stepped in when local authorities failed. Change happens when individuals unite against oppression, understanding that an attack on one person's rights is an attack on everyone's freedom. But the fight doesn't end with one victory. As Kendra herself realized, power doesn't surrender easily. Corruption adapts, finding new cracks to exploit. That's why vigilance matters, why voices must remain loud, why truth must be pursued without hesitation. Now I turn to you. What would you have done in Kendra's place? Would you have fought even when the system was stacked against you? Comment number 1. If you believe standing up for justice is always worth the risk. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others. Let's keep shining light into the dark corners where injustice hides. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay strong, and never stop fighting for what's right. Until next time.